Yeah, so I'm a painter. You can't see much of my studio, but we're in my studio, and paints and pigments are really important to me, and I love the histories and the different stories that come with them. And so what I wanted to show you today is how to make egg tempera paint. And egg tempera paint is a really old form of paint. So it's much older than things like acrylic or oil paint. It was used lots in, say, like medieval panel paintings. And what's nice about it is that it gives a really kind of flat colour. So yeah, I think we should just get started. The first things, hopefully you've all got some sort of palette in front of you. So this is going to be where you mix the palette. We're going to mix one colour first, and then a little later mix the second one. So if you've got a small palette or, you know, a plate or something, just make sure there's a bit of space for the second colour. So hopefully you've got some dry pigments, a red and a black. I'll tell you a little bit more about those as we go along. Hopefully you can't quite see, but you've got some sort of pot or bowl to collect the egg white and the egg yolk in, because a bit like in cake making, the first thing we're going to do is separate the egg white from the egg yolk. And egg tempera paint uses the egg yolk, which is a really amazing type of glue. So other things, hopefully, or it would be great if you had a bit of kitchen towel, which you're going to lay on your hand to catch the egg yolk. And also, hopefully you've got some water close to hand for brushes. Also, it might get a bit messy. So if I show you first, then you can follow. If you get an egg, and so as I said, the first thing that we want to do is separate the egg yolk from the egg white. And the aim, now I said in the equipment list that the fresher the eggs, the better. And the reason why is because egg yolks are contained in a sac. And as the eggs get older, that sac gets a little weaker. So the egg yolk is more likely to break. If they're really fresh, so I'm lucky, so I live in the countryside, the egg yolk should be strong enough that you can pick it up with your 2 fingers and suspend it over a bowl, somehow prick the egg yolk and catch the contents, and then you can discard the skin. You might not get that far, but do your best to separate the egg and the yolk. So if you could very, very gently, just pass the egg yolk between the 2 eggshells.
I should just say that we've got Charlotte here in the office who is trying this along with you, Nina. So every now and then we'll switch over. We'll show you what this is Charlotte here in the hospital room's office.
Brilliant. Yes, perfect.
You can see how we're going. And if anyone has any questions throughout, just pop them in the Q&A like normal.
So you'll probably notice at this point, I've managed to get quite a lot of the egg white away, but not all of it. And this is generally where it goes wrong. So if your eggs aren't the freshest, you might want to skip this bit. But if you want to do this really properly, and it is good fun to try, The next thing you're going to do is just roll the egg yolk onto the paper towel, and immediately, so it doesn't stick, just roll it off and catch it into the palm of your other hand. So I'm going to try. Oh, and mine's already burst. Oh. Damn it.
I guess, Nina, this is kind of something that you can practice over time. Practice makes perfect, maybe.
It's definitely something you can practice over time. So yeah, technically when they're really fresh, I'm just seeing if anyone else is managing it. You should be able to roll it straight up. Yes! Charlotte's doing it. And then you should be able to pick it up with 2 fingers. Oh. Yes, so Charlotte, pick it up with 2 fingers and see if you can suspend it over your pot.
That's it. Yep.
And then you can pierce it with the bottom. Just get it with your nails so you can get rid of the skin.
There we go.
Much better than me. So once you've got that far, and if it completely failed, you can always do another egg. The next thing, just mix a tiny bit of water into the egg yolk and just give it a swirl around. So egg yolk is a glue, as I said, and that's why it makes such a good paint, but it dries almost immediately. So if you add a bit of water in, it just keeps everything a bit wetter for longer. So put that aside, and now pick a colour that you want to use first. So I'm going to mix up a bit of this red, and this red is called iron oxide red. And what I want you to do is just, if you make a very small mountain on your palette and just make a tiny well in the middle. And the first thing I want you to do is just add a few drops of water. And I always do this just with my fingers. I just capture a few drops. And you just want to make the pigment into a bit of a paste first. Obviously, just be a bit careful not to make lots of dust everywhere. So it might be quite difficult to work. If it's too crumbly, just add a little bit more, but you want to be careful that you don't make anything too runny. So with your palette knife, if you don't have a palette knife, you can just use the back of a spoon, that's fine. Just work it into a paste. And the next thing,
making a paste here as well.
It's probably better if it's more crumbly. So, you know, if it's, because you're going to add the egg, which will make it a lot more runny. So it's best to err on the side of dryness. So then you can just pour a little bit of your egg mixture. You want about half egg binder to the paint. And again, just mix it all around. And I guess the aim of making paint, you just want everything, you want all of the pigment to be completely rotated in the binder. I always show this if you're interested in paint making properly. This is called a muller, and it's made out of glass, and it's got a bit of a I don't know what you call it, serrated edge on the bottom, or a bit of a rough edge, and it's good for grinding, so it's good for just working the pigment into the binder. And if you can, just gather the paint together a little bit. You can always add more pigment if it's looking a bit too runny. I might add a tiny bit more. I always think it's really surprising how little pigment you need to make a lot of paint.
I think when we met, Nina, you said that you'd gotten some pigment from the Lizard near where you are in Cornwall. Yeah, I really enjoy collecting pigments. You have to be a bit careful to know what you're collecting, but these two pigments that we're using, in fact, they're two iron-based pigments. So the black is called Mars Black, and they're both essentially like earth pigments, kind of synthetic, man-made earth pigments. And then I think earlier I said that I really like stories, and particularly, so Mars Black gets its name from the god of war, Mars, and Mars was always associated in Western Europe with war, because iron is the strongest metal, and weapons were often made with iron. So I sort of like the idea that these two pigments are so strong in their covering power. They're really war horses of pigments. We've just had a question, actually.
Yeah.
Someone has asked, because obviously you're using egg, does it kind of go off? Can it cause the artwork to have like a smell to it, or?
No, so it's really amazing. The egg, it dries so quickly. So obviously if you left this mixture in a jar, it would go off, but if it's applied in a thin layer, it lasts for centuries. So okay, so if you've got that far, maybe we can start painting. And as I said, I think we're going to do a bit of painting first, and then we will come back and make the second colour. So just clear a bit of space on your table if you can. You might need some water to wet your brush. So the first thing I want you to do is, if you've got 2 sheets of paper, I want you just to number very casually 1 to 5, spread out on your paper. And I don't want you to think too much about this at all, and you'll see why in a moment. So by each of the numbers, I want you very quickly and without too much thought, just to put 5 simple marks, or they could be outlines, icons, something that just flows from your brush easily. If you want, you can copy what I'm doing, or you can think up your own. So by number 1, I'm just going to do a dash. By number 2, I'm going to do an eye shape. By number 3, I'm going to do a cross. By number 4, I'm going to do a spiral. And by number 5, I'm going to do a vase shape. So whatever you pick, just keep them really simple, because this is going to be your key for making a painting. And you just need to be able to repeat the shapes really quickly and simply. So move that aside and put it somewhere where you can see it, and get a piece of paper to work on. And now I just want you to cover the whole piece of paper with shapes taken from your key, and make sure you cover the whole piece of paper in a sort of lacework of shapes. So don't think where you're putting them or what the relationship is to each other. Just think some of them can be really big, some of them can be really small, some can be upside down. So if I start, you can follow. So I'm going to, in fact, I'll just lay this out so you can see it. So I think I'm going to start with my number 2, the eye, and I'm just going to do this. I think I'm just going to do my eye several times. And when you feel like you've had enough of one, go on to the next one. So I'm going to start on my 3s now. Or no, maybe I'm going to do some 5s. And just get a feel for the paint. As I said earlier, it's so different to oil paint because it dries so flatly. Oil paint is a paint that is all about layers. So oil paint, because it has a very slow drying time, you can leave it for days and days and rework layers, whereas egg tempera paint, you can't really mix too much. It's more like almost making a stained glass painting. You sort of slot areas of colour together rather than layering them one over the other. I always think when painting it's good not to think too much. If I think too much, I start panicking about making a good work, and sometimes I think the best things happen when you just switch off. So at some point you might decide you don't want to fit any more on, and it probably looks quite random and all over the place, but don't worry, we're going to make the next colour up and just fill in the spaces and zone out to yeah, just filling in blank spaces. Oops. So get your palette back, and you've probably still got quite a lot of egg mixture left. But if you haven't, you're very welcome to crack another egg and start the process again. So I'm going to get my black now and just do exactly the same thing. So make sure you make a little mountain and create a well in the middle. Essentially, all paint making is a little bit like this. So paint is really simple. It's always made from a binder and, oh, I forgot to mix water in. It's always made from a binder, which essentially means a type of glue, and a pigment. And depending on what binder the paint uses, that is what differentiates different types of paint. So oil paint is made with linseed oil. That's the kind of glue that sticks the mixture together. And watercolours use gum arabic. And you really notice that different pigments have different feels about them. Some need more binder and some need less, and you only really learn that through using them. Some are more gritty than others, some are really, really fine. Others, like lump black, can be quite oily.
We've had another question, Nina.
Yeah.
Someone's asking, can you keep any leftover paint in a jar, and if so, for about how long?
Yeah, you can. It's much better to use the egg because it's a natural product. It's much better to use it straight away in one go. But it really depends on the weather and if it's really hot. You can keep it in the fridge for several days, but beyond several days, I wouldn't use it. So I guess it's quite good just to get in the practice of knowing how much you need for a day, which sounds really complicated, but I think the more you use paints, you just get a natural feel for it. So again, I guess everyone's at their own paces, but when you've finished making your next colour, just go back to your painting and just fill in the gaps, and feel free to make another one or experiment. This is just a starting point.
We've had another question, Nina, about the type of palette knife you're using.
Yeah.
Anywhere where you can recommend where you could get that sort of palette knife?
Yeah, this is just from Winsor & Newton, and it's quite it's quite a good one because it's quite strong. I find some of the smaller ones a bit spindly. I'm not sure what it's called though, but if you go, they'll have a whole selection of them on Jackson's Art or Great Art, any of those kind of big art shops. But some of them, especially the ones, so this has got quite a thick base, some of them can be quite thin, and I've noticed they break much more easily. Quite funny painting on camera. I sort of never paint with people watching.
We've had that quite a lot in the other sessions.
Really? It's so shy, especially because with painting, I think it's such a personal, private thing that and often I don't think about how I make a painting. Often it's just really, it's not random because I have an idea and I will make lots of drawings and things, but I can never really explain how I get from A to B. Oh, something else actually I should say, if you are really interested in using egg tempera, historically, it was always painted on wood panels, so like a prepared wood panel, and it's much better really if it's on a stiffer surface than paper. I mean, for the sake of experimentation today, it's fine, and it doesn't. I mean, in a way, it's only if you want your paint to last for hundreds and hundreds of years, but because canvas and paper are flexible, so they move around, it just means that the paint is more likely to crack. And again, if you do want wood panels, you can buy those from Jackson's Art, have a really good selection.
I'm just going to switch screen to show everyone Charlotte's been making along with you here in the office.
Oh, wow. I think the green background really helps in Charlotte's. I'm going to steal that next time. I wonder if any of you can notice the texture. So like with oil paints always have that sheen to them, and the same with acrylics. They always, I think acrylic paints are plastic based, and you can never quite get rid of that kind of plasticky quality to them. Whereas this dries completely flat and matte. I'm slightly embarrassed about my painting.
I love it. I think it's reminding me of, you know, Greek vases.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. So
those Greek vases are amazing, actually. I know the ones you mean.
and a very similar kind of color scheme as well.
Yeah, yeah. So black and red and white as a color triad, I guess. They're so ancient, and lots of cultures first had words for black, white, and red before any other color. And also red when we're born. So first of all, we're supposed to see black and white, and then red is supposed to be the first color that we see as babies.
Oh, I didn't know. I knew about black and white, but I didn't know about red.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah.
If anyone's got any more questions about the process, feel free to pop them in the Q&A. And of course, afterwards, we'll be sending around a link for the online gallery. So if you have been giving this a go and making your own paint, we'd love to see your work. So you can send images of that to us too.
I have a feeling I might not get all of my black in, so I'm trying to speed up and be selective about what I'm choosing to paint. I think I'm going to try and get all of this vase shape blocked in somehow. I think sometimes making paintings in this way, it can be quite generative because you're not thinking too hard about where things go, and sometimes it can be quite surprising what comes out, you know, the sort of relationships different things make when they're jammed together.
So we've had another question, Nina.
Yeah.
Asked, when the painting is dry, can you kind of reactivate it with water or not?
No, it's not like watercolor. Once it's dry, it's dry. But you can paint another layer on top of it. And also, so with really early Renaissance paintings, something they did was paint the first layer with egg tempera, and then and then let that dry, and then they would paint with oil, or oil on the top. So if you did, you could completely rework into these with another paint form like oil or acrylic. Something also medieval artists used to do was burnish the finished painting with like an agate rock, and if you burnish it, it sort of crushes the pigments together even more, and just creates a really flat surface and kind of brings out a shine in the colour. It used to happen lots in or Indian miniature paintings do that as well, where you literally just rub a rock again and again and again over the surface of the painting. I wonder, is there any more questions about the actual process of making egg tempera? I wonder if everyone managed to separate their eggs and yolks okay. Silence.
Silence can be good. It can be
yeah.
painting away. Well, like I mentioned earlier, we have the video that Nina recorded a little bit earlier, so you can go back and watch that, or you can go back and watch this session as well. So kind of lots of ways to try out making paint. So we've just had a question about the recording of the video, and we will be recording the session. It's being recorded, so we're going to be putting that on our YouTube channel, and I'll also just add a link in the Q&A for the pre-recorded video. And we've just had another question about is it possible to use turmeric as a pigment?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, well, it's a dye, it's not a pigment. Turmeric it's funny, it fades really quickly. So if the painting you're making sits in a book where sunlight doesn't get to it, then it will probably be okay. But just bear in mind, if your picture is going to sit in sunlight, it will probably lose its colour very quickly. So yeah, just bear that in mind. I mean, I think it's kind of beautiful that that idea of fugitivity, but it's not if you want to sell your work, maybe, or yeah, keep it as it is for a long time.
We've had a really lovely comment just saying, thank you so much, Nina. It's been a lovely, very informative session. I love painting with egg tempera. That's really, really lovely.
Thank you.
And we had another question about any other natural things that can be used as pigments. I know you obviously spoke about the iron oxides and that being earth pigments.
So there's a really, my favourite earth pigment is a black called Bideford Black, which is from Devon. So there's this seam of coal and graphite that runs through, is it North Devon, Bideford? I forget. And it's so beautiful. It's like such a soft, clayish grey black. It's a little bit expensive because it's not in mass production, but you can get that from, I get lots of pigments from Kremner, Kremner. Yeah, they've just got such an amazing range of colours, but that's beautiful and that's nice because it's from England. And I think the thing with pigments also, some of them can be quite toxic, like some of the stones, so you've got to be a bit careful. Earth colours are generally really good, like ochres and siennas. So yeah, Biderford Black's a good one. What else? There's lots of dyes that you can find in the landscape. So I make this really wonderful ink called oak apple ink, which you could research online, but it's made from oak apples, which they're basically, they look a little bit like fruits that grow on oak trees, but they're actually made by a reaction between a gall wasp and the bark of a tree, and they make these round balls on the tree, and they get these little holes in, so only pick them if you see a hole, because that means that the wasp has hatched, because they laid their larvae in them. And those, if you crush them up and soak them in water in an old iron pot, just let it stand in them, let the water and the crushed oak apples stand in the pot for about 2 months. It sounds a bit weird, but it will completely react, because the oak apples are filled with tannin, and it will make a black ink, which is it's been used in England for hundreds of years. So things like the Domesday Book was written in oak apple ink, and Bach's manuscripts were written in oak apple ink. So that's a good one.
We've had another question about painting on wooden board.
Yeah.
If you were to paint on a wooden panel, would you need to prepare the surface for painting first?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. Yes, you would. So traditionally, something called rabbit skin glue size was always used to seal wood panels, but obviously lots of people are vegetarian and don't want to use hide glue. So you could just seal it with an acrylic primer, or a company called Lascaux, Lascaux. They do a really good clear primer, which you can seal the surface with. Also, traditionally, you would cover it with, you'd cover the panel with something called gesso, which was made with rabbit skin glue and chalk. And it's this really, really beautiful surface where it's kind of, you can polish it so it becomes very smooth. And yeah, so that was always the surface of choice.
Someone has asked, is this iron oxide egg tempera washable, i.e. if it ends up on your clothes?
Yes, it should come out. I'm covered in it too.
So I think we're almost coming to the end of the session. It's absolutely flown by, but we've probably got time if anyone has some last couple of questions for Nina or about the process. We can go through those quickly. So if you do have kind of any final questions, just pop them in the Q&A.
Madly trying to get all of my white spaces filled in before the end.
Gonna see how Charlotte's been getting on.
Yeah, it's looking good.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nina. It's been such a fun afternoon, and we've had so many lovely comments saying how much people have enjoyed this workshop. So that's really lovely. Thank you for your comments and your questions. So let me just look go here. So we are going to be back next week with a workshop with John T. Lees, which is going to be about making a sketchbook and filling it with drawings. So that'll be really fun. So feel free to come back next Thursday at 2 o'clock. We're going to be sending an email later on today with the link to the online gallery. So if you have made your own paint and created some artworks today, please share them with us. There'll also be a link to the survey. I think that's everything for now, but yeah, thanks everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Nina, as well. It's been really fun.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope everyone's come away with something that they can use again.
Amazing. So thanks everyone, and we will see you next week. Bye.